Good.
Okay, so now we're on part 2 of the exam, and we're going to go down the list of the qualities and talk about certain leaders that we think are part of those qualities, and maybe some of the things in the readings that we think back that up. So starting with vision.
Okay, so for vision, we had an article called The Blind Men and the Elephant. And basically this article was about a couple of blind men trying to figure out what an elephant was by touching it and feeling it. So kind of...
and like they all had different ideas on what it was.
Well, because they all felt different parts.
Yeah, feeling different
Yeah.
parts of
Right.
it.
Their perspectives were different.
Yeah,
Right.
that's the most important thing.
And that what they observed about the elephant wasn't necessarily wrong, but it was just like one part of the whole picture.
Yeah. So with that, we know that vision is crucial for leadership. We've talked about that a lot in class. And so which leaders do we think we're kind of basing our leaders off of the list that we made at the beginning of the semester. And adding a couple more here and there. But which leaders do you think had good vision?
I think Napoleon had great vision. You have to have great vision to conquer half of Europe.
Yeah.
But he had like a very set plan, and he was very strategic in the way he went about it. I really think he had it from the get-go planned out, his exact moves of how he was going to.
Could you also say that Alexander the Great would go?
Yeah,
definitely.
Totally. Cool.
Yeah.
Because they're both kind of conquerors.
Yeah.
I think on a different note, someone that comes to mind when I think of vision is Lincoln, and I know that he wasn't like a huge conqueror or anything, but I think that in the midst of the but like in the midst of the Civil War, he had a vision of unification and was willing to make certain sacrifices and was willing to do what it took to reunify the country.
And he stuck to his vision, which was important.
Yeah.
He,
Yeah.
no matter what happened, he'd still follow that same vision
And
and
he
didn't give up,
had
which
a
is
good
important.
vision.
Right.
Which is
Yeah.
also important.
And unlike the other two leaders, his vision kind of is still intact today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
That's
maybe
So,
Lincoln wins for
Lincoln.
that one.
Lincoln down.
Yeah.
Okay.
Lincoln.
On to Risker.
Risker. Okay, for the risk, we had the article about Colonel Bell
Called Risk Aversion.
and his speech. Just to make sure. He was basically talking about the flaws of the Army system and the ways that the Army averts risks and is afraid to step out.
Right. And how that has caused the Army problems. So kind of what we learned from that is if nobody's risking, then nothing gets done.
Right.
Yeah.
Because no one's prepared for a situation that would be outside of a normal
Yeah.
boundaries.
And his speech itself was a risk because he was going in front of his peers and leaders
Yeah.
and like
Higher ups.
saying what you're doing is wrong. And
Yeah.
so that itself was a risk because
Yeah.
he put his own reputation
On the line.
on the line.
And then I'd say like Martin Luther definitely took like a big risk, like especially with the blatant like 99 Theses, like posting on the door, like saying like I don't really agree with what you guys are doing. I'm gonna do it this way, and then we're still following to like to this day. That was a good risk.
Yeah, I think so. And then also you could say George Washington maybe with that. I think that the founding fathers in general really took a huge risk in defying England and saying no, we won't stand for this. And I mean they went to blood for that, and so
Yeah.
I think that was a huge risk. He knew that if he were caught and they didn't succeed, he would die.
Yeah. And I think a big part of all of those leaders who took the risk, there was a purpose behind it. And so that's why they were willing to take the risk, and that's what drove them when they faced the challenges. And so I think both of those people are good examples because they had a common good goal in sight, and that's why they were taking the risk for it.
I think they're both great too because they're both going in uncharted waters. Like they're both tackling something that hasn't been done before and are kind of doing it blindly, not knowing what the end result would be.
Yeah, I think we could have them tie for risk.
Yeah.
Okay. Power. What did we read?
Power.
For power?
Oops. Let's see what we read for power.
Still reading.
Was that the
That was the
The energy that was.
like energy every president must know.
Oh yeah,
What was it?
the energy stuff.
Physics.
Physics for
Physics.
presidents.
Physics.
Yeah.
Presidents.
Yeah,
And we talked about how in that article there's different ways that power can be used, whether it's power like in gasoline being slowly used
Yeah.
versus like dynamite being all in one energetic burst.
Yeah.
You want power to be something that is sustainable and that it's not all used up in one shot. And I think a leader we talked about who had good power and used it to lead was Adolf Hitler. He rose to power within the Third Reich, and with every higher position he got, he gained more respect from his people because of the fact he was a risk taker. He had a vision, and as a
And
result,
he took advantage of like the environment that he was in, like like the World War One, like Great Depression, like really helped him like to rise to that position.
Yeah.
So in that position, he used his power to again rebuild the German army and German nation as a whole from ashes.
Yeah.
So
I think along that same line, you could say Mao Zedong from China is the same kind of thing. Took a nation, the environment I think is key for power, and so he took a nation and turned it into what we know as China today, and had it. That's Mao. Also, and then I would also say Castro.
Yeah.
And he and his buddies, I mean, started a revolution in Cuba, and so they are showing that socialism can work sometimes. And I mean, you can debate the quality of life of the people, but they did take over because of their power. I mean, they were outsiders, and they came in and took over.
Yeah, and it shows because they've been in power for so long, Mao Zedong and Castro. That shows it's not like they are in power for 1 or 2 years. Like it's been an extensive length of time, so they have a lot of power over the people in their countries.
Yeah. Okay. Well,
So
I mean, personally, for like choosing who would win, I guess. For me, I think I'd have to say Castro just because of the length of his power. Where I think Hitler's power was really concentrated, and when we're talking about power and talking about explosives, I think that Hitler was definitely like a dynamite kind of explosion, whereas Castro is more like gasoline or oil, where it lasts for a long time.
yeah, I definitely agree with that.
Yeah. Castro.
Castro for shizzle.
okay.
All right, presents. For
That was the
presents,
King's
We read about
Richard one.
yeah, we read
Dangerously.
about King Richard and
Living dangerously.
taking on the role and living through the role of King Richard.
And like one thought I remember having about the reading of presents was like, I know like my mom, like whenever she like goes into like a situation where she's trying to like get something done, she she thinks about herself already having it, and like she thinks like this person is going to give me like what I want, so she goes into it with that. And that's like what Richard did. Like he went into it like he was so good at what he did because he knew what he wanted to do.
So some people that come into mind for that are, well, I guess you could even say Obama.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
He has charisma. He has the charisma factor of presence.
Yeah.
But then also, like, when he's talking, people listen, and they will go with him for these goals that he has because of this presence that he carries with him. Obama?
I think. Oh,
You can
No.
say it to somebody else.
no, it's okay.
You sure?
No, what are we on presents?
Yeah.
Yeah. No.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
That's great.
Okay. Energy and passion.
All right, energy and passion. We read "Good to Great"
Not
by
the whole thing, just a
Collins.
little extra.
And it was talking about like basically that most great leaders come from
Speak good.
below and work up. And then it talked about ferocious resolve, fanatically driven, and determination.
So with those qualities,
I'd go back to Hitler and just say that he had like tons of like energy and like he was always like he was ferocious like with like what he did, and like he just like made people follow him.
Well, like you watch videos of his speeches and stuff, and he his passion is it's just so catching.
Yeah.
He's really passionate, and you can see his passion reflected in the entire crowd. And he just makes people want to follow him because of his passion. You see him up there, and he's yelling, and people are really like excited by that, and drawn to that, which I think is a good thing.
I think in a completely opposite contrast, Mother Teresa can even come into play because of her like determination to help poor people in India, and like I've read like a lot of stories about where she had like faith struggles and doubts with God, and how she persevered in times of like where she became depressed from helping people, and so she stuck through that, and she was determined to help people like despite any challenges that it faced and like the heartbreak that it caused for her. So she's very determined to her cause.
Yeah.
And she stuck with it till the day that she died.
Yeah. I think also with that you could say Mandela,
Yeah.
because he, was in prison for forever and then came out still with the resolve to change things.
And then became the president.
Yeah, and then became Morgan Freeman.
Yeah. It's a great movie star.
Who would we say for that one would be the best example?
For EQ?
No,
No,
for
for
action.
Out of those three, out of Mother
I don't know if
Teresa.
like you could pick like a best. Like I think they have like their individual qualities that make them like at times better than the other.
Yeah, and I think
they're different.
right. I think they had different passions. Like Hitler wanted to control Germany and bring it out of this. He had government passion, but Mother Teresa had spiritual passion and compassion.
Yeah.
And so I think that they're different.
And like both good for leading different groups of people.
But I think you have to distinguish between passion and motivation. Because to me, Hitler isn't. I mean, he was passionate, but to me, that was more like his internal motivations versus like Mother Teresa was passionate about poor people.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah, that's very true. I don't know.
I should get on board with that.
I'll go with both.
Okay, Hitler and Mother Teresa. Awesome. Then for EQ,
I feel like the shoe-in for EQ is Mother Teresa.
yeah.
But I also
Or
say Mandela.
Mandela,
Yeah,
for
that's
sure.
true.
I almost think Mandela, because he was imprisoned for so long and came out of it
That's
in a
true.
healthy state when he
Yeah.
led his country.
He was
Yeah.
persecuted
That's
more.
true.
And he's still
Yeah.
like doing stuff like
And-
for his party.
Not
No,
only
not
that, but Mandela had an amazing way of connecting with not just like his own people, but with the complete opposites, like his Afrikaners and
Yeah.
people in complete opposition of him couldn't help but love him. You
Yeah.
know, because he just was so in tune with other people's emotions and knew how to relate and connect with them.
Yeah, let's go with Mandela for that one.
Okay.
Cool. Down to communication.
Oh, should we be talking about what we read?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Next. Communication. What did we read for communication? I
I
don't
think
know
we
if
did.
we read
on
anything.
the main things. So we'll just
Okay.
maybe reference some stuff.
We could even talk about exercises.
Yeah.
I think Churchill was a really good communicator. He kind of just led the way after World War II and with Reconstruction, and everyone kind of looked to him and FDR as like the main.
Yeah. And what were we talking about in international business the other day where Churchill said, we will not,
Oh yeah, he had one phrase in it.
Yeah.
he
Like
said it
rocked.
4 times. And that was it. And,
Yeah.
and it rocked
Yeah.
Europe. And
I think even Colonel Bell, though, I think he took the appropriate channels of communication. He was clear when he was speaking to the people who were in a higher authority than him to say what he wanted, what his vision was. He didn't broadcast it to a general audience. He gave it to a very specific group that had a chance to make an impact.
yeah.
So
My quote was, "We will not surrender."
That's right.
So
And then like going back to just even class today, like communication was so important. Like to like take that first risk and then explain to like the person behind you, unless you communication, like this is like what like this is what I just did. Like make sure you do this so that we don't have to do this over again.
Mm-hmm. Well, who do we want to pick for communication? Let's say Churchill, since he's more of a well-known
Yeah.
leader, but I mean Colonel Bell for sure took advantage of his communication. Motivation.
I think motivation could still be Winston Churchill as well. He had his communication skills that were meant to influence Europe, and he drove basically the Allied powers to strengthen their resolve to defeat the Axis forces.
Mm-hmm.
That was a very strong motivational factor for Winston Churchill, knowing that the strength and will of a people was not in his control, but he was influencing that significantly.
Yeah,
I
I think Martin Luther King
Yeah, that's what I was
Jr.
gonna say.
like has like was motivating, and then also had his own personal motivation, like to like bring about the civil rights movement. Like he obviously was an African American, so he was like fighting for that, but then also was like able to motivate so many people to take a stand with him.
Blacks and whites.
PC?
Whoops.
Ooh, that behavior. Let's move on.
Okay, so
I would
MLK.
say Martin, yeah,
Yeah.
MLK.
For
That's
motivation.
Because
Junior.
he stayed motivated even when he was persecuted. So.
Yeah.
Behavior.
Alright, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I don't necessarily know which articles would fit into that one.
I don't think we really read.
I think almost the Civil War one though could fit into that, talking about
That's
how
true.
Yeah,
How they handled
definitely.
it differently.
Yeah,
That's
how-
true.
yeah, and how the different leaders handled their different situations differently.
Yeah, that's true.
We also talked about though how maybe for an actual leader who had different behaviors, Genghis Khan, when he was leading his army across all of Asia, he was with his generals.
On
He
the
was
front lines.
on the front
Yeah.
lines. He was very involved.
Yeah.
Versus other leaders, like maybe those during the Revolutionary War, they were kind of leading by proxy, meaning that they weren't always at the front lines of all the battles because they couldn't be everywhere at once.
Which makes me think of like the story of like 300, where like the Spartans, like their leader was like with them fighting, like he
Yeah.
was like and like was willing to die, whereas like the Persian leader was like, well, chill back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Xerxes.
So then, who do we want to pick for that?
I think one's better than the other. I think
They're just
it's different
different.
styles of
Yeah.
leaders. So
I think they both exemplify the two different
Yeah.
types, which is good to have both
Yeah.
because there are different styles of
Yeah.
behaviors.
So
It's
George
not right or
Washington
wrong.
and Genghis Khan are good for that one.
yeah.
One hits me one more time.
One more time.
So
Okay.
for followers, who comes to mind for me would be Kim Jong Il, because I think of when he passed away and all of the videos on YouTube of people in Korea that were like bawling their eyes out and
Yeah.
screaming, and you would have thought that their husband or wife or child had just died, and that was for days and weeks that people would gather and cry, and so that just shows his ability to capture these people, and it was
Yeah.
his followers, and they were so
And it doesn't even like
believed in
matter if
him.
they're good or bad. Like
Yeah.
we always think of it as like such
Yeah.
a bad person, but like you could still be attached to a bad
Yeah.
person.
Yeah, and so that really comes to mind for me. What about
It's kind of hard because you look at leaders, and just the title of leaders means that they had followers.
Yeah.
And so I think it's hard to narrow down. I feel like we could argue any of these people for,
Yeah.
who had the best followers or whatever.
Because I can also think of Gandhi because he was able to get so many people all over India to join his cause.
Yeah.
Everyone that did the Salt March and walked with him for miles and miles for days, and so that shows he was able to capture another audience as well and a strong following for a common cause as well.
Yeah, and he didn't do that by force
Yeah.
or they fear like
Yeah,
Yeah.
Kim Jong Il.
he just started walking and people joined.
Mm-hmm.
So he wasn't necessarily like shouting for people to join him, but people did.
Yeah.
There's just different approaches.
Yeah, exactly.
I think what Jess said is right because any of the leaders that we have on our list has
to have
you
followers.
have
You
to
have to
have
have
followers
followers.
in order to create change. So it's like
Yeah.
we could argue every single person here had
Yeah.
at least
So go with
some
mom.
We'll go with everybody.
form of followers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's just move to environment.
Okay.
Who had an fear? We're talking about how.
The environment that leaders
Yeah.
create for their
So-
people. That's what comes to mind for me. So thinking of different styles
Yeah.
of leadership and how that impacts people.
I feel like our leaders here have like a total polarity, either a very positive environment of social change and justice, or the complete
Total-
opposite
total
of
fear.
and
Yeah, oppression.
repression.
Mhm.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I think of environment, I also think of, what leaders took advantage of their environment the best. And of course, leaders that rose to power come to mind. Like Hitler took complete advantage of his
Yeah.
environment.
Yeah. Stalin too.
Yeah, exactly. Just being aware of the environment
Yeah.
and
using
being
it to
able
like your
to
best
manipulate
advantage.
it.
Yeah.
Okay. So who
We could say Stalin and Hitler for that.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, exactly.
Change forces.
So is that like
People
leaders
who
that
create
that created change?
Or
Yeah.
made an
What was
impact.
the change or die
change.
thing?
Yeah, it was. So the
Yeah.
article for that was change or die.
So it's bringing about change.
Oh, this was the one about health issues and how even when
Oh, yeah.
people
Yeah,
were
when-
told
when they
that
knew.
they were gonna
Oh,
die,
yeah.
but they
Okay.
still didn't change their lifestyles.
So it's difficult to change.
Right.
Yeah, because
Create
people are
change.
so set in the ideas of what they want to do.
Yeah.
Even when a strong leader, like a doctor, might come along and say, if you don't change your habits, the best that won't happen to you. You'll die. And how, again, people are they resist change so much because their lifestyle is so set in what they do.
Yeah. I think for that, somebody that comes to mind right away is Martin Luther King Jr.
Yeah.
Because people were totally set in their ways with that.
On
and
both
he-
sides.
On both sides. And he brought them together.
And
Even
then-
William Wilberforce and against the whole slavery movement,
Yeah.
and so that was another good one. He had to face opposition in Parliament and government, and people were so set in their ways.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In like the South, and people thought that it was right and good. So that's another example that comes to
And
mind.
then like a similar situation is like Mandela, like similar like racial
Yeah,
tensions
yeah.
and just like total like struggles like against it and like getting people like to understand like no, this isn't right.
Those are all really good
Yeah.
examples. Yeah.
Alright.
Wow.
I think that's
So
I think we did everybody.
All right.
Alright.
So
Part-
signing off.
That concludes part 2
Stay
of our final.
classy. Dr. Stevens.